Hey everybody, it's Dana and welcome back to day 2 of the Valentine's Day card series. I hope you were inspired by day 1. Let's go ahead and get into making the card for today. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of mixed media work. I haven't done mixed media in quite some time, so I thought I would pull out my Hero Hues inks in Taffy, Fruit Punch, Splash, and Berry Smoothie. This is going to be our color combination for today. And I'm also going to be using some other products from Hero Arts as well that really coordinate perfectly together. So let's go ahead and start working with these inks. Now I am going to use watercolor paper for this. So this is a panel of Canson white watercolor paper, and I'm also going to use a piece of acetate. This is going to help me get some of that ink blending going. Now I haven't done the smushing technique in, oh my God, I don't even know how long. It's been quite some time. So I thought it would be perfect to use for today's card. Now, as you can see, I put down a little bit of that taffy ink. And next I'm going to come in with a little bit of the smooth berry. I am going to make sure to mix my colors kind of on the acetate, and if I get any of the colors together, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to grab my little towel and then I can wipe off the excess ink, and that ink pad is going to work just perfectly. I did kind of pull some of the colors together, but what's really going to make it move is water. So I do want to first spritz down my paper, and then I will spritz some water onto the acetate. Now the reason I spritz the water on the paper is I really want this color to move as soon as I flip this over. So once I flip this down, you can see that it's really spreading onto the paper, and it's really going to give me a nice wash of color. So as you can see, I kind of let it sit there for a second or two, and now I'm just using my fingers to kind of push that color into the paper. I'm just tapping and rubbing, and this is going to allow me to get those colors to kind of blend with each other. And as I'm doing this, I feel like I need a little bit more pressure. So I'm going to bring in my little tool here, and that's going to help me really push that color towards the edge of the cardstock. Now remember, both of these pieces were wet. The acetate was wet as well as the cardstock. So that's really helping me blend those colors together. Once I'm kind of satisfied, I'm going to peel one corner up and kind of roll back on itself. As you can see, I'm rolling the color back on itself, so they're not really mixing anymore. I can bring that up and look at the gorgeous soft color wash I have. Now this is where I want to stop. I want to stop this color from moving, so I'm going to use my heat tool to start drying back this first layer. I'm going to build up the layers as I go, but that first color wash, I want that to kind of be set in the paper. I do make sure to dry my paper from the front and the back, just to make sure that I get most of the dampness out. Now I'm not going to waste this color here. I'm just going to add a little bit more water to it, and this is where I'm going to start building up that texture. I'll just go in first by just tapping in my cardstock, and you see I'm going to get maybe some harsh lines on there, and that's good because that's what I want. I want to have that color wash. So once I have all of the color up that I think I'm going to need, I will add a little bit more water, and this is going to help those colors again blend on this cardstock. That's one reason why I wanted to use watercolor cardstock for this, or watercolor paper for this, because I knew I was going to be using a lot of color. And if I used regular like Neenah paper, 80 or 110 pound, it would not stand up. Next, I'm going to come in with the next darkest color, and I'm going to start mixing again. This time you're going to see I'm going to spray the mat first, spray my paper, and then put my acetate into the paper. This is just another way to get a nice little color wash. But once I put this on here, you can see I have some texture now going. One more time, I'll just kind of smush that around with my fingers. get those colors really mixing, pull back. But this time I'm going to kind of pull back so I get some crease marks. As you can see, I have a good amount of crease marks. Can you see that texture now? And that's super, super easy to do when you're using that piece of acetate. I'm going to add in now some of that splash color. And my paper's still kind of wet. Again, I will mist the color that is on my glass mat and start dipping in that cardstock. As you can see, I'm really getting a great mix of these colors, and I'm really not wasting a lot of ink. I do want to make sure I dry this back so the color sets. Now, while I was drying this back, I felt the need that I wanted a little bit of shimmer on this. So I went ahead and grabbed my iridescent spray from Hero Arts, and I'm going to mist this on here before I thoroughly dry this back. And this is going to give me a nice bit of shimmer on my cardstock. Once again, I need to heat set this because I need this to be nice and dry before we go on to the next step. And look at the great texture and the mix of colors I have. I don't do mixed media a lot, but when I do it this way, I'm not so much intimidated by it because I know I can get really great color blends and also a little bit of texture in my paper. So if you feel like you're a little bit intimidated by mixed media, try doing it this way and tell me what you think. Next, I'm going to come in with that chain linked bold print. And this piece here, I want to make sure is dry because I'm going to do some heat embossing. So I do want to bring out my powder tool and just kind of test this first. I'm going to grab my Hero Arts white embossing powder, and I'm going to sprinkle this on the paper first. I just want to make sure that this isn't sticking everywhere. I see that it's sticking just a little bit, so that just is kind of telling me my paper's not dried all the way. So all I'm going to do is grab a dry paintbrush, kind of knock over those pieces, and then I'm going to dry this back one more time. Just want to make sure this is thoroughly dry. Next, I'm going to come in with some clear embossing ink from Hero Arts, and I'm going to grab a piece of purple tape and place that behind my panel. So when I close my misty lid on this, it's going to stay in place just in case I have to double stamp this. So just by having that little piece of tape on the back, that's going to stick to the top of my misty. And I know that if I have to double stamp this, everything's going to be in place. I do want to add some firm pressure to this because I do have watercolor paper. Remember, watercolor paper has texture in it. So I might not get a good impression the first time. So once again, by putting that little piece of tape on the back, that's going to guarantee me that my paper's not going to shift. So I'll come right back in with that clear embossing ink, and then I can close down my lid one more time. And again, I'm going to add some really good hard pressure to this because I want this design to get into the grooves of that paper. I think I have it perfectly now, and now I can bring in the embossing powder. I like to use this little tray that I keep in my container to make sure that I don't actually stick my fingers into my embossing powder, or I really don't dunk the paper in. So this way, just using that tray allows me to get a little bit more coverage than I would, let's say, if I was just using a little spoon, which I had used a little spoon for like years until I saw a couple of my crafting friends using this little tray. And it just works perfectly to add on some of your embossing powder without getting your fingers all messy. Once I have a good amount on there, I am going to flip my card over and kind of tap it with my paintbrush to get off any extra that I don't want to heat set into my design. So once again, I'll grab my heat tool and make sure to heat this from the front and the back. And when I'm heating from the front and the back, it's also going to help me with the warping of my paper. So now I have this gorgeous design, and look at that shimmer on there. Oh, I think it's so pretty. I'm going to come in now with that chain link fancy die. This works perfectly with this background. I am going to die cut this 3 times out of white cardstock because the lines are pretty thin and I want to have a thicker embellishment. So what I'm doing here is just using some glue so I can glue these layers together. Now, sometimes when you're putting glue on fine lines like this, you might not want the glue to get everywhere. So a little tip that I've learned is to take a piece of scratch paper and dab off any excess ink first onto the paper before you bring it over to your embellishment to stack. That's going to kind of guarantee that you just don't get a whole bunch of seepage and like glue it in areas that you really don't want it to be. So like I said, this is 3 layers thick. So this is going to give me a really good thick embellishment, and it's going to allow me to have a little bit more texture on that card panel. Now, once I get everything lined up, I'm going to bring in my tool one more time and kind of like press that down. So I know that each one of these little corners are going to match up and I'm going to have a solid embellishment. And look how pretty that is. Now, when I lay this onto the card panel, you're really going to see the texture that it builds up. Because I have the design on top of the design, it actually makes it look a little bit more raised and gives great dimension to this background. Now I can go ahead and set this aside and work on my next element. These are lock dies, and this is also from Hero Arts. And I'm going to grab a few of these to put on my card panel. They all come together like this, so I'm just using my little snips to snip these apart. And I'm not sure if I'm going to use all of them, but I think maybe 3 of them. Anytime you're working with these dies, I find it easy just to put the snips right next to the die, twist, and you'll be able to get those little bits off. Now with these little dies here, I thought adding a little bit of silver to this. So this is matte silver cardstock, and I'm going to go ahead and run this through my die cut machine. Now this is an added element to the color palette I already have, but I thought having this would give it a nice pop. Now I did make sure to die cut this out of the silver matte cardstock as well as white cardstock, because this silver matte cardstock is kind of thin. So I wanted to make sure that when I use these, they're a little bit weighted. And I love using the silver matte cardstock because it actually looks like locks. And I think that is so cool. Remember, I have all the products linked below. And if you guys are looking for more Valentine's Day inspiration, I have years and years worth of Valentine's Day playlists that I'll list in the description box below. Now I'll add that finishing one. And I really, really love this large one. I think this is so pretty. And again, it really does look like a lock when you do it in that gorgeous matte cardstock. So this mixed media Valentine's card is really coming together. And look, it's very, very simple, right? I just right now have some die cuts and a background. That's how we're starting this one off. So now since I have all of my elements pretty much done, I'm going to lay out the design. So I know I want my large heart to be in the middle, and then maybe put one on the bottom right hand corner, one at the top left, so like you can see the design going across the page. But you know what? I think I'm going to remove the 2 silver locks and I'll use that on a card later. I think I just want to have the silver one this time. Now, if you are new to my channel, welcome and thank you so much for stopping by today. And if you're liking what you see, just go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you here. And if you're inspired to make anything new, go ahead and tag me so I can see what you're making. Now, I did want to cut down this panel just a little bit, so I am going to bring in my paper trimmer and just cut this so it's about 1/4 of an inch on each side, like the top and the bottom, so I can put this onto a card panel and I'll have a little bit of a white border around. This is just an easy way too. If you've made a mixed media card and it's not looking how you want it, you can trim it down till you get the area that you want. or you can die cut it and really focus in on an area that you really love. Now I can come back in and I can adhere down that chain link die, or chain link die, and we'll place that right over the top. Now again, this is really going to give my card a lot of texture. Once I get that into place, I know already, because I already planned out the design, that I want the heart lock to go right in the center. So this I did want to pop up a little bit, and because there's a lot of openings within that die, I kind of figured if I glued it down, I wouldn't hit all the spots correctly. So I'm just going to use a thin piece of double-sided foam tape, and I'll just press that around. Now, an easy way to get this foam tape to bend is remove the backer on both sides, and then you can kind of guide that little thin strip around corners. This is just a good tip. If you ever need to bend it around a corner or something, just take off the backing, and it seems to be a little bit more pliable for you to be able to bend that foam tape. Once I get it around, I have a tiny little piece left, and I'm going to use that piece right at the top. But I'm going to kind of try to lay it where you don't see it when I flip this over. So again, by having the backer taken off of this, I can bend that around, and see, you just don't see it in the front. All right, now I can go ahead and place that down onto my card panel. Now, if you guys would like to see more color combinations, please make sure to leave your comments below, because I am working on some of those for you. Now, look how pretty this card is. Now, I don't want to make this overly busy, so I just want to use one sentiment. So I'm going to use a sentiment from the Flower Girls. This is a brand new stamp set from Hero Arts, and I think I'm going to use that Happy Valentine's Day. It's thin enough in its font that I could use it without it overpowering anything else on the card. So I'm going to line that up in my MISTI, and I'm going to keep the color palette going with this. So you guys might have seen me do this in previous videos, where I make the sentiment triple colored. So I make sure to bring in all the colors that I've used and bring those same colors into my sentiment. So I'm going to start off first with the taffy color, and then I'm going to come in with the splash. So again, this is going to give me a pretty rainbow sentiment. And then for the last color, I'm going to bring in that berry smoothie. Now what I need to do is just kind of take away a little bit of that blue, because once I put the berry color in there, I wanted it to kind of overlap so I can create another color. So I'll lightly tap that down. I'm not pushing too hard because this is a fine line sentiment and I really don't want it to bloom out too much. I can press that down, and I see that I just need to add a little bit more color to my V. So I'll tap on a little bit more of that taffy color and press that down. And then look how pretty this sentiment is. If you really just don't want to have a black sentiment, this is the perfect way to have a nice colorful sentiment. So I use my little mini trimmer here, and I trimmed down that sentiment, leaving just a little bit of a border around. Now I'm going to slide that right underneath. And now you can totally see how this whole color palette is working perfectly together. So sometimes when you're using or making cards and you really just don't want to have that black sentiment, just go ahead and use a color that you used within your color palette. And I would guarantee you it's going to look beautiful. Now I added the same amount of foam tape, or the same foam strips rather, and I'll have those linked below. I love, love, love these foam strips. And I'm just gonna tuck that really nice and tight right under my lock. And I love this splash of silver on here. I really think that lock really does look like a lock, right? And look how gorgeous that is. Now, because I did use watercolor paper, the paper did bow. So I'm being very, very generous here with my double-sided foam tape. And this is just going to guarantee that the card is going to lay flat on my card base. Now I do have a little corner off here to the side. I'm going to end up putting a little bit of foam tape there as well. But I also like to use a little bit of glue because this gives me just a tad bit of a wiggle room when I lay this down onto my card panel. So keep that in mind too. Anytime you're using foam tape and you think you might need some wiggle room, add a little bit of glue to the back of it. So once I can take that off, I'll use a little bit more of that glue. And then again, I can turn this over and that glue is going to give me just a tad bit of wiggle room before I have to press this down. Now over on the blog, I have 2 more cards featuring this color combination. You will really want to check those out. They're absolutely gorgeous. And I actually used Copics for one of them. I know, shocking. Haven't used my Copics in forever. So make sure to go over to my blog. I have the link below. All right, everybody, that is day 2 of the Valentine's Day card series and my mixed media Valentine's Day card. Have a great day, everybody, and I will see you back here tomorrow for day 3. All right, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.